Hi, I'm Chuck Dorsett for Weaver Leather Supply. Let's make a Musketeer Baldric. Now, I say Musketeer. This could easily go pirate, or as far as sci-fi. That's a good-looking project. We're going to use this beautiful floral buckle, keeper, and tip. Now, because of that, it's a little busy. So on our decoration, let's back off. Let's go with a simple line of conical spots and a 4-buckle frog. This is going to be a beautiful project. All right, so anything I use in this video, weaverleathersupply.com, or check below. We've got links going to take you straight to the website. Also, if you want to know when our videos release, just click your notifications. You'll know exactly when these come out. So let's step over to our pattern table, get started. We've got a complicated pattern here. It really isn't. We're going to break this down. Everything's going to fall right into place. We've got a digital pick. We'll look at that shortly, but we've got a couple of notes. Well, first off, how do we size this? Easily done. Now, I'm a right-hand draw, left side carry. Does not matter. But on my left side, just as an example, I'm going to find the bottom of my belt. And that is going to be parallel with this. So, let's take a tape measure. I'm going to measure roughly from the seam on the left side, bottom of my belt. I'm going to come around over my shoulder, back to a center point on my chest. That's going to be roughly to that second hole. All we have to do is add this measurement. We've got our blank length. On the buckle side, same thing. Let's measure roughly from our seam at the bottom of our belt, come up to the midpoint on our chest. That's going to be the middle of our oblong. All we have to do there is add this distance. That gives us our blank. Now, over on our billets, I'm not big on a 1/2 inch spread on our holes, but it's a rapier scabbard. There's not a lot of circumference there. So a 1/2 inch should be fine. Also, we've got 4 of those, but if we can't get it exactly as tight as we want to, we can always add a shim in there, and that scabbard will be absolutely tight on our frog. One more point here. We've got a 20-degree spread there. We can always add to that. If we want to bring our basket up and the tip down a little bit, all we have to do on our frog body is let's just raise this bottom line, and then with these 4 sets of holes, let's just punch those parallel to our new line. So easily done there. And over to our digital pick. Let's start with our strapping. We've got 49-inch length, 2 1/4 inch wide, and then we're going to taper that down to 1 1/2 inch. Same on the buckle side, 19 inches, and we're going to taper that down to 1 1/2 inch. Now, on our frogs, we're going to have to cut 4 each of these. So the tongue side, 6 inches by 5/8, the buckle, 3 5/8 by 5/8, and then we've got our small keeper, 3/8 by 2 3/4. Okay, we've got a feel for our strapping. Over to our digital pick for our frog body. So along the bottom, technically that's 4 7/8 of an inch, but we can absolutely cut that at 5. We've got 6 3/4 inch high, 3 1/2 inch across the top. And then on our rivet hole, or our punch holes, 1 1/2 inch spread, 1 1/2 inch from our bottom edge. Now, one good point. With this frog, the throat of our scabbard is going to be about 4 inches, maybe 3 inches below our belt. We can always add or subtract. If we want to carry that lower, we can absolutely do it. And it looks very good. And one more point on our decorations. I have not added decoration to our pattern because this is the one place, make it your own. We can carve it, we can stamp, we can paint, we can braid, we can add spots. The point is, so many great ways to go to make this your own. But what we're going to do, let's go with these cool conical spots. Those are going to look good. We're going to drop those in every 3 inches. All right, we know what we're doing here. Let's step over to our main table, start cutting some leather. Let's go with a natural veg tan for our baldric because we're going to need 2 weights of leather. So right here, for our billets, we're going to need a 4 to 5 ounce, and the perfect place to pull those are single shoulders. And in my opinion, those are one of the best cuts for us crafters. It's a good piece of leather, and it's an affordable price. Now, on our strapping, 7 to 8 ounce here. Now, 8 to 9 ounce is fine. 6 to 7 is fine. But I'm betting we're going to have an expensive sword on this baldric, so I want a good sturdy strap. 7 to 8, that's a good weight for this. Now, we could pull this out of a single shoulder. Here's the downside. With single shoulders, we're only going to get about 35, maybe 38 inches in length. What we can do, we don't have to have a long strap. We can always make a bridge, and we can drop this anywhere. So right here, actually, that would look pretty good. So now we only have to cut a strap this long, and the length there. But also, we could drop that right on the shoulder. We could put it down near the frog. Actually, I almost like this design with it over the shoulder. Almost like that better than what we're doing. But anyway, I've got a long enough piece of leather here. I'm going to cut one full strap. Now, this is our Shaheen leather. It's our strap leather. In my opinion, one of the best leathers out there. It does everything beautifully. Now, the width of our strap, we're at 2 1/4 inches. So I'm going to set my wooden strap cutter, 2 1/4 inches, and I'm going to draw a strap out of this side. Yeah, that side is about 8 1/2 feet long. I always talk about overcuts. We've got to be so careful with these. In fact, there's 2 right there. I don't guess I'm the person that should be telling us not to do that. Now on our strap, luckily, I can work our smaller buckle side in between those cuts. So let's start with, we'll mark, we're going to cut to size and just cut to length. We'll come back for our taper. Now I've got 2 different markings on my pattern. I've got black and red. Black means we're going to punch a hole. Red means we just need to mark that. So let's cut this out. Good, we've got that. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing to our longer strap. And there we are. Let's reset, punch our holes, cut our tapers. I tend to like to punch my holes on a taper after I taper, simply because it's easier to center a mark on a smaller strap. These are measured, I know they are. They still look just a little bit that way. So we'll cut our taper, then we'll come back, punch our holes. Now for a taper, if you're not familiar with this, this will make perfect sense very shortly. But what we're going to do is cut, then we'll punch with an English punch. So all I need here is 2 marks. I'm going to put a mark on that side and that side. That way I know where to stop my wooden strap cutter, okay? So we're going to go from 2 1/4 down to 1 1/2. That's 3/4 of an inch. We split that, 3/8 of an inch. So we're going to trim 3/8 of an inch off either side. So I'm going to come down to 3/8. Good. Now, I'm going to bring my wooden strap cutter. There's our mark. We've got about 1/4 of an inch there, so I'm going to go about 1/4 of an inch past that. Good. Right on the nose. Same thing other side. Yeah, there we go. Those are parallel. That's what we're looking for. I'm going to do the same thing here, but here's a good note. So right here, notice to the last hole our taper is much shorter. That's because on this side we're going to have a buckle. Over here, this is the tongue that's going to go through that buckle. And if this hole is too high, that buckle won't sit on the top hole on that strap. All right, same thing over here. And we've got that. Okay, let's step over to our punch table. Hit these with an English punch. While we're over here, we're going to knock out a couple of punches, but let's start with our taper. So I'm going to spread those 2 pieces out. I can see exactly where the end of that cut is. Now I'm going to go with a 1-inch English punch. We can go with multiple sizes. We simply could trace that out and cut it if we don't have the punch. But this is how easy it is to do a taper. There we go. How clean and easy is that? But also we can use a taper in so many places, from a wider strap to a smaller buckle, D-ring, O, clip. I'm going to do the same thing here. Okay, we've got that, and those look even. Very nice. Next up, let's go ahead and add our oblong into our strap. I've got my 2 center rivet holes. I'm going to try to center best I can between those 2 and the left and right side of our strap. Good. Nice and even. That's what we're looking for. And just one more. So on our pattern, we're going to use a tip. Boy, that looks good. This is going to be a beautiful baldric. Anyway, the point is, on the end of the strap, and on my pattern, I've got this marked, 1 1/4 inch English punch, extend cuts 1/4 inch. So what that means is right here, I can actually use a punch to cut this out. Now we don't have to have a punch. We can trace this in, and I would say cut in about 1/8 of an inch all the way around. But a punch makes it so easy. So 1 1/4 inch, let's turn this around. Gonna get right to the end, and I'm gonna do my best to center that right there. Okay, we've got that. Now let's turn that back around. That said, extend our cuts 1/4 inch, okay. Good. Now, let's cut shoulders on that. Good. Okay. Now, let's see how this fits. Perfect. How easy is that? All right. Back to our main table. Let's punch some holes. 3 easy steps here, and our strapping ready to die. So on a revolving punch, top end. This is the Weaver revolving punch. Now love this. Replaceable tubes, replaceable anvil. We can even replace that spring if we want to. But an affordable alternative, it's our heavy duty revolving punch. It's a good, solid tool. And again, right here, replaceable tubes. Now, on our holes here, first off, we've got to make sure we do not punch these holes marked in red. So it's not a bad idea to lay our pattern next to what we're punching. So for our rivet holes, I'm going to go with a tube about the 3rd, maybe the 4th up from the bottom, because I want our rivet a little bit snug in that hole. So let's punch these holes. Good, we've got that. And on the other end, these 3 holes. Okay, over to the main strap. I'm going to cut through or punch these 3 holes, the smaller tube. There we are. Now, on our size holes, let's go up to our largest tube. Good, we've got that. Now, to save us a little time, like I said, on our frog, we can go with a 4 to 5 ounce or the 7 to 8 ounce, but I'm going to bring the Shaheen back out. I'm going to cut this out and mark it, and we'll pick up there. Good, we've got that marked. Now we could punch this here, but our revolving punch is not going to hit these 2 center holes. We'll come back to that. Now we're going to groove and bevel our edges. So this is how our baldric's actually going to go together. And our frog's going to sit right there. The reason I bring this up is we only have to do the end of one of these straps. So the way we'll do it, we'll drop our frog down first, longer strap is going to go in the middle, and shorter will be on the top. So on this strap, we're going to groove an edge across the bottom. Don't need to worry about it here and here. That's what I'm getting at. So over here, let's start with this. Now I'm going to go with a groover, and I'm going to set this at 1/8 of an inch. We're going to go all the way around, except right here, we don't necessarily need to groove across there. Okay, we've got that. Nice touch to our edge. Now, 7/8 ounce, let's go with a number 2 master tool edger. And again, I'm going to edge all the way around, minus this end, but also I'm going to flip this over and edge our flesh side as well. And in all honesty, on the back side, we don't really need to hit that. Okay, same thing over here on our frog. Good, we've got our edge on that. I'm not necessarily going to worry about edging the back on our frog, but back over to our main strap. Same as the shorter strap. Now, one point I didn't mention this, but we don't need to groove or edge on this tip. But again, notice how my edger just glides through the sheen. I love this leather. Now our flesh side, never going to edge as easily as our top grain, but if we have a sharp tool, it's not bad. But the bigger point here, we're just taking off that hard back edge. And there we go. Those two pieces are ready to die. Let's reset here, work on our billets. And over to our 4 to 5. So on our billets, we're going to need 4 of each, but also we're going to need 4 of our small keepers. I'm just going to cut that out of scrap. But here's one big point. Notice how fuzzy that leather is. We don't want that. All that is a dull strapper blade. And I love the blades on these. They're inexpensive, they're easy to replace, and very sharp. But when we do replace this, we're going to strap this very easily. It's going to be very clean on our edges. And there we are. How nice is that? Yeah. So, let's go ahead, before we cut this down, before we cut this to size, let's go ahead and add a groove line both sides. Yeah, there we go. Now, we could edge on this, but I'm not going to drop in an edge. Okay, let's cut to size. Again, 4 and 4. Whew, that was close. Yeah, okay. So now with our pattern, let's mark for our punch holes. So on our holes, let's go up to about the 3rd, maybe the 4th tube on this. We've got a smaller buckle on these, so we don't need a large hole for our size holes. But let's come down again to about the 3rd or 4th hole, and let's punch our holes. And those are all ready to punch, okay? So again, just to save us a little time, I'm going to cut our 4 keepers, 2 3/4 long by 3/8 of an inch wide. Very nice. We burned up that little piece of scrap nicely. Now on these, don't necessarily need a pattern, but again, let's go down to 2nd or 3rd hole, and we just need a hole in both ends. Very good. Okay, let's take our billets. Don't forget our frog. So let's go punch our round end, our round hole, and our English punch. Let's start with our frog. We just need to punch holes here. So let's go with our Master Tools round hole drive punch. We're going to go with 1/8 of an inch. Let's hit all of our holes. Okay, we've got that. Now over to our tongue side. On these, 5/8 of an inch. So let's go with our 5/8 of an inch English punch. Okay, those look good. Very nice. Next up, our smaller buckle side. So on these, the rule in leather, 5/8 inch strap, 5/8 inch oblong. But on our buckle, we've got a pretty good size loop there. So I'm going to bump that up to a 1 inch. And we've got that. Okay, next up, we could go with an English punch, but since I have a 5/8 inch round end, let's do that. We're going to do that on the opposite end from our oblong. And there we go. That's a nice professional looking billet. Very cool. I think we're ready to dye our baldric. Now, for those of us with a little experience dyeing leather, I'm going to take a minute for the folks that are new or that want to jump into it. It's a couple of tricks to dyeing this. The big point here, dyeing leather does not have to be expensive, messy, or time consuming. So let's start right here. That's just a cheap plastic trash bag. That's going to protect my work surface. But if we dye on that, it becomes an absolute mess. So right here, this is the packing paper from Weaver. If you get a piece of leather, it comes rolled in this. I'm almost as happy to see this as I am the leather. Makes a great pattern material too. The point is let's put this down over the trash bag. Now, clean up here. We're going to dip dye. Clean up, we can take care of that with one paper towel because I've got a small funnel and I'm going to store my dye in the original bottle. It will last a long time. Now with dye, we do need some ventilation, but this is our pro dye. It's the only dye I use. All right, let's start here. We've got some hooks made just from some inexpensive wire from a hardware store. So I'm going to dip dye. All I'm going to do is drag this through, and that's all we need. Now, I don't typically like to go with black for our projects and videos, but this is going to look so good with our buckle, keeper tip, and spots. And there we go. That's dyed. We leave it there. We walk away. So I'm going to toss that over there. Now on these guys, that can be a headache. One at a time, not technically. We can go two at a time. But how about we do this? How about a piece of coat hanger? Now I can dye all of these. One dip, we're done. Now we're not going to here because those are longer. And it kind of becomes a little bit of a mess trying to get everything down in the dye. So I'm going to dye our shorter pieces, then our longer. But on these, it's a good trick. Let's turn these flesh to flesh, or top grain out. Yeah, there we go. Notice how they bow out. If we're dyeing in a different color, that means that those two pieces aren't going to stick together and give us a bad discoloration with our dye. Well, that was easy enough. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing with those. Okay, over to our larger straps. Let's go first off with our longer strap. And let the excess drain off. Now we can keep a rag nearby just to mop up the excess dye, but typically, by the time I let it drain and then lay back down on the table, that dye's about gone. Good, we've got that. Now, another nice thing about these hooks is we can hang this up and let it dry. It'll dry a good bit faster, but I'm going to leave these laying out. Let's give these about maybe 2-3 hours to dry. For us crafters, the quart of dye seems to me to be the most economical way to go. But when we step over to our top coat, the leather balm, this is my favorite, we'll talk about that. But for us leather crafters, the 4 ounce, this is going to go a long way. Now, if we're doing much larger projects, the quart, again, can be economical. Now, for those of us that are new, a top coat. This is going to protect us from the leather and the leather from us. So right here, we've got a very flat strap, good, deep, rich black. But when we add our top coat, that's the outcome. It's going to make it look very clean, very finished, and very professional. Now, I like the leather balm. First off, this is easy to apply. We don't need ventilation, and it's easy to make this look good. I should use more top coats in our videos, but this does everything I want it to. Now, when we apply this, I like to go with a fleece because that's going to absorb a good bit of the leather balm. We can cover a much larger project. We're going to let that dry. Then we'll come back with a soft cotton rag. We're going to buff, and this is going to look nice. So with our leather balm, let's apply this evenly, but let's be a little conservative because what I don't want is streaks and bubbles. We'll be able to see those when it dries and when we buff it. But let's just add our leather balm. Good. Okay, but let's set that piece aside. I'm going to step over and do our billets. And even our keepers are going to look nice. Okay, we've got those done. I'm going to step over to our longer strapping. And on our longer strapping, I made a pass down and then back. Okay, let's give these just about 5 minutes and then we'll buff. We've had a few minutes of dry time. So let's start with our frog, take our cotton rag, and let's just buff. And that's it. There we go. Nice looking piece. I'm going to do the same thing to everything else. Very nice. Oh, that looks good. I think we're ready to assemble this. Let's start by adding our spots. I add spots to most of my projects because first off, they look good. They really make a project pop, but they're inexpensive and they're easy to add. We're going to set these by hand, but we don't have to. We've got a machine called the Little Wonder. It's not just a production shop machine. That's great for us crafters. If we're setting a lot of rivets, grommets, eyelets, spots, that's absolutely the way to go. But if we don't have one, we're not going to let that stop us from setting some pretty spots. Now, there's 5 steps to setting a spot by hand. So right here, I've got our craft knife or our art knife, and I've got a small pad here. Let's do this. I'll do one, and then we'll do the balance of these. So I'm going to take my spot, and I've got our tines. I've got my mark there for our spot. Can we? Yeah, there we go. I'm going to straddle that, and I'm going to press that spot in. Yeah, now we can see where our tine marks are. I'd like to get that as centered as possible. That could be a little better centered. But let's do this. Let's come through. What we're doing here is we're mimicking the width of the tine. So let's flip our art knife around and come through the other side. Okay, we've got our holes. Let's take our spot. Let's push that through. Nice. Notice how flush that is. That's what we're looking for. All right, our next step. Let's be careful here because we've got a knife blade. But I'm going to take this and I'm going to force those 2 tines inward. Yeah, there we go. That's going to stay. But let's do one more thing. Let's put this on our quartz or our marble. Now, this is pretty chewed up here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hammer down our spot. I don't necessarily mean hammer down. Maybe tap down. Because when we tap it, let's don't hit it hard enough to ding it. They're pretty sturdy. But what I'm doing is now, when I flip this over, I can't even feel that spot. It's not going to snag or grab on anything. Now, that could be a little bit tedious one at a time. So let's do this. Let's mark all of our holes. Then we'll cut all of our holes. It just makes the whole thing a little bit faster. And we've got that. Those look nice. To me, it's a little bit of less is more. It's going to look good with our buckles. Now, one point here. When we're cutting our slits, the one thing I don't want is more slit than spot. But at the same time, I don't want to have to try to force that spot through there. So it's a thin line there, but I think we've done a good job on this. All right, let's go add some rivets and some buckles. Let's start with our keepers. So we're going to take this, I've got this top grain up, I'm going to come through the back side, we're going to spin this around and go through that other hole. Good. Now, one thing I love about the double caps, we're going to use the small double cap here for our keeper. We can click the cap down without actually setting the rivet. So with this, it's hard to find a little piece of metal that's going to go through here. We don't have to. Let's go ahead and set this right on itself. We've got a good flat surface. Good. That's all we need from our keeper. I'll do the same thing to the other 3. Okay, our keepers are done. Those look good. Now over to our billets. This is our flat buckle, 5/8 inch, nickel plated. And I love these. We've got these in multiple finishes and sizes. This is going to look good with our hardware on our baldric. So let's load our buckle. Good. Let's stick with the same small or the 1/4 inch double cap. Let's come over to the edge of our marble. Keep that buckle there. Good. And now let's set that rivet. Okay, let's do that 3 more times. Good, we've got those. Okay, let's reset, add these to our frog. Let's step up to our medium double cap. Let's put 4 out here. This is the 5/16 inch. And now on our tongue side, let's go top grain down. And these are going to sit in our first line of holes. Now, that's a little too much post sticking above our top grain. We should go with a small, but I want to go with a medium because we've got a larger cap and a larger post. We'll just do our best to set these as straight up and down as we can. Okay, we've got a good set on those. Now, let's put 4 posts in these 4 holes. Now, before we put our billets on, let's make sure to remember our keeper. This is so easy to forget. So let's slide that on. Now, let's put our billet on. We've got our frog ready to go, and that looks good. Nice. Let's set our buckle. Now our buckle, our keeper, and our tip. These are not sold as a set. These are sold separately, but 1.5 inch on all 3. So let's start with our buckle. But here, let's make sure again, let's don't forget our keeper. That's going to slide in. Now let's load our buckle. And let's go with a medium rivet on these. Our holes lining up nicely. We've got a good pattern and we've taken our time. Very nice. That is starting to look good. All right, let's reset one more time. We'll add our 2 straps together. Let's step up to our large double cap rivets, the 7/16 inch. Let's start with our frog. Now again, we can stack this any way we want to. That's just how we planned it, by edging right here. So the next strap, our back strap, is going to sit right there. Very nice. Our holes again lining up. And now our front strap. We've got it thus far. All right, let's add our tip and a sword. When you get a tip, typically it's going to come with a tip screw, 1 or 2. Now that little screw, it's actually pointed. So it's going to screw down into the leather. That's what's going to hold it onto the tip. Typically, these are flathead or Phillips, which this small eyeglass repair kit, big help in our shops. But when we've got a good quality piece of hardware, now we need an Allen wrench. So let's slide this on. Let's force that up right to the shoulders. Very nice fit. Now let's flip this over and let's tighten that screw down. And it's getting tight, very nice. That tip isn't going anywhere. That looks good. On this particular scabbard, I've got a roped edge at the top and the bottom of the throat. So I'm going to set that lower roped edge right between my third and my fourth buckle. Now that means this one might be a little bit loose. That's okay, as long as we're secure up here. The one thing we don't want is for our scabbard to come out when we draw our sword. So let's start right up top, see how the fit is. I have to force it around, but that is a perfect fit. Yeah, there we go. Now that last buckle, that's a little bit loose. That's not an issue. These three, I really had to crank that strap down to get to that last hole, but that scabbard is secure in that frog. All right, let's add a sword, see how it fits. In my opinion, a baldric is the most comfortable way to wear a sword. This fits good and feels good. And right here on our frog, good fit on our scabbard. Something that's nice as well. My hand rests right on that pommel. Well, that's nice, convenient, but there's a part two to that. If we're at a show, fair, con, it's crowded, we want to go in a shop or a booth, let's raise our rapier up. That brings that tip down. It's no longer a problem for us or those around us. But all told, I think we've got a good looking baldric here. I hope you have a great time designing yours, making yours, and I hope it's just the detail that brings your costume all kinds of great compliments. Good luck with your projects.